Okay, sharpening. This is going to be one of the longer chapters on this video. Main reason is if you can't sharpen, you're going to have a terrible time turning. You won't be able to get the wood to cut well. You're going to have to do 10 times as much sanding, and it's twice as much work. There are a number of different options on the sanding or the grinding and keeping your tools sharp. Some people think that you can take a hone and that'll keep them going forever. It doesn't. You can take them to professional sharpening services, but the problem is you get back and you use the tool for 10 or 15 minutes and it needs to be sharpened again. So this is something that you have to learn to do on your own. It's a little bit intimidating at first if you're not familiar with sharpening, but after a little bit of practice, just like with a bolt turning, everything gets a lot easier. There are several different ways to do it. I have what I would consider to be specialized sharpening centers, and these are geared more towards just your wood turning tools. They're generally not suitable for your fine tools like your bench planes or your chisels, but you might be able to get away with sharpening like your lawnmower blades on them. And then there are what I would call multi-purpose sharpening systems, and these will sharpen just about anything in your shop, again from lawnmower blades on up into your bench planes and bench chisels. So we're going to break that down and go into a number of different things here. You know you're a wood turner when your table saw basically is a place for storing all your other wood turning accessories, and I'm definitely no exception to this case, but this is the easiest place for me to show all the different grinders. High speed, slow speed, variable speed. You want 8, 7 or 6-inch wheels. It doesn't really make any difference. I think most people have an easier time with the slow speed grinders just because they're less intimidating. High-speed grinders would come in particularly handy if you want to do some major shaping of your tools and want to remove a lot of steel very quickly. If you don't have one like that, you can actually, like if you want to take a scraper and round it off way more than it is, put a profile on it, take it down to your local saw shop, and most of them will have grinders that they can take that off really, really quickly with. So this is the first grinder I ever got. This is kind of a no-name 8-inch grinder. They go on sale a couple times a year. I think this was about 80 bucks when I got it. They're up to about 90 right now. Not a real high-quality machine, but they do work. Well, one of my wood turning buddies cries every time he sees me bring this into a turning demonstration because it's gotten so dirty. It sits behind me when I turn, and I turn a lot of wet wood, so of course this collects a lot of fly-off from the wet wood. I love this type of a grinder, 3/4 horsepower, heavy duty. It's one that I can use and abuse. I'm not going to break it or slow it down. And one of the things I like best about it is when you turn it on, it just purrs. This is not just the wheels that are on there. I've never even dreamed of having to bolt this down or clamp it down to my workbench because it's not going to move. But just love these, you know, and if you have the money, they're worth every penny, especially if you're doing production type work, because they will last forever. Okay, this is another type of a sharpening system. This is what I would call a wet wheel. It's a very slow speed system. Trough down in here holds water, keeps the wheel lubricated and fairly clean. Runs at a very slow RPM. I don't have any water in there right now. It also has a honing station over on this side, so you can hone like your carving chisels and gouges. It works fairly well for the wood turning tools, and I think it must work pretty well because there are a bunch of clones of this out on the market right now. I don't particularly use it very often, and it's one I need to experiment more with. Those that do use it just absolutely love it and rant and rave about it and say you get a sharper edge and the edges last longer, and I don't really know. If you want to do platform sharpening, this is a little adjustable platform. Set it up and down. This arm here moves in and out so you can change angles. And it also has a nice little gouge jig which can go on there so you can sharpen gouges with just about any profile you want. Nice little machine. I got it actually way before I ever started turning. I was just intending to do my bench chisels and plane irons on it, and just kind of got away from the flat work world when I got my lathe. But it is a nice system and it does work. Okay, this little tool here is called the Work Sharp Station. One of the things I love about their company is one of their slogans is a dull chisel is just a screwdriver, which pretty sums up sharpening and how to use your wood tools. I would consider this thing to be a sharpens everything in your shop, from your axes to gouge chisels to your bench planes. They run abrasives and grits from 80 up to about 6,000, so you can put just about any kind of edge on it that you want. This is a new product for them. This is actually a prototype, but this is a jig for mounting your Tormek sharpening guides on it. This is adjustable up and down. In this particular one, we're going to show how to do a gouge jig on it. So this can change your angles, and you can change the angles on there so you can get any type of a profile that you want. And Jeremiah will show you how to use it.
Slide that onto the arm.
Really very simple to use. It runs at fairly slow speed, so no intimidation factors there at all. Basically, if this gets dull, you just put another disc on. Don't have to worry about cleaning it or truing it up like you do with your matrix type wheels.
And these are also mounted onto glass plates, so it's really flat, and you get a good consistent surface each time.
Well, Jeremiah just showed me this part of this machine. This glass plate, you can put abrasives on both sides. One of the nifty little things is this. That's an attachment for chisels, apparently not set up for skew chisels, but has a very handy angle setting jig there. Can you show how that works? It's a little lever release, and it locks. So if you want to sharpen your bench chisels, that's a good thing for it. Skew chisels will sharpen off this with the Tormek jigs. So abrasives on either side. And again, they've got a wide range of abrasives you can put on that. Okay, so you can sharpen anything on this. Okay, this is another variation of what I call the long arm type of gouge jigs. I think this was the first one that was ever put out. Long arm this way. I don't use this anymore. Used to use it a lot because I've gone to the platform sharpening. But basically it sets on a pivoting center about here. You set the gouge in to whatever depth you want. And I think this originally was set at about 2 inches. For my depth stop, I actually had a little angle bracket like this set on the board. That would give me how deep I wanted it in. You can change how blunt of an angle or how pointy of an angle by doing a little bit deeper or a little bit shorter. This would go on a pivoting center here. You just take it and roll it. If you wanted way more sweep back, you just roll it a lot further along the edges. Work pretty nicely. There's all sorts of homemade versions of these. I just don't use the long arm ones. Talking about sharpening our tools, the question that always comes up is, well, what grit of stones do you want? And of course the answer to that one is everybody does it a little bit differently. On the coarse side, I think a few people do use 60 grit stones. For the fine side, some of them will go up to 180, 320, or some people will actually hone their cutting edges, and I don't know that it makes a huge difference. One of the things that set my thinking wheels spinning, I was chatting with Mike Mahoney and mentioned to him that, yeah, when you freehand sharpen, it looks like you use a pretty coarse wheel, and he says, yeah, I like a more serrated edge on it because it helps the wood cut better. And I kind of went, I never thought of that before. I've started playing around with it, and most of it would probably not be noticeable to 99.9% of the turners that are out there. A lot of people have an 80 grit wheel. That works great for scrapers, a little bit coarse for my taste for gouges. This one is 180 grit. It works just fine. 120 grit, I used them for years. The hone, I don't know if that makes any difference. I think the main thing to consider is that you don't want an edge that you can shave with. That works great for your bench chisels, your bench planes. But if you stop and think about it, in an hour's worth of turning, you can put out miles of shavings, and a real fine, real delicate edge that you can shave your face with just won't work for that. It won't hold up to that type of abuse, and the 120 to 80 grit works just great. Okay, these are the original grinding wheels that came with my Baldor grinders. They work They're not intended for the type of tools that we use. Their rough one is a 36 grit, which is maybe a step or two above sidewalk. Their fine one is 60. Some people do use 60 grit wheels, and apparently they've changed their materials because these are different color. These are the ones that came on the new one. They will work if you've got nothing else, but then there are more of them that are made specifically for grinding or sharpening tools, and they work better. Okay, some years ago, I went into a search for the ultimate grinding wheel. I'd bought some add-ons or some ones from the stores which are better than the ones that came with the grinders, because most of the ones that come with the grinders are not intended for the type of grinding and sharpening that we do. I talked to some of the big names in the grinding companies, or the ones that made these type of abrasive wheels, and they said, well, you've got two choices. One is diamond and the other is CBN. CBN is cubic boric nitride, I think. I don't really know exactly what it is. It's very common in the metal grinding industry. It's used primarily for doing things like molder blades where they want a profile. And it's a material that's very hard and doesn't wear out. And it is designed for grinding steel. Your diamond does work better for carbide or your really hard metals. And I went with the CBN. Now this is a matrix type wheel. Matrix meaning this had about 3/8 of an inch of matrix on it, so the grinding particles, the abrasive particles are in this mix. It is put onto an aluminum hub. The aluminum hub is spin balanced. It's not going to wobble, it's never going to fly apart on you, much safer. This particular wheel will wear a little bit. They cost me originally about $300, kind of spendy, but you consider that my wheel over on this side here, I've had this for about 6 years worth of production turning. It still has about half the matrix left on it. They do develop a little bit of run out in them from lots of heavy use, and I asked about that. And I was told, well, if you figure your motor shaft has 1,000 or 2 of run out, your bushing might have another 1,000 or 2 of run out in it, and then your arbor hole in your wheel might have another 1,000 or 2. You have millions of revolutions on the motor, and that's going to develop a little bit of run out in your wheels. You cannot fix the run out with a diamond dresser. It'll eat the diamond dresser. That's how hard the stuff is. And what they gave me for cleaning up the wheels, this is a very, very hard aluminum oxide grit. This is what they use to shape the wheels with and true them up. When they do get run out in them, I take them back once a year or so. They will true them up for me. It's kind of a nuisance to do that. You know, it's easy for me because I happen to live in the town. But basically, it's just take this, and that's about all you have to do to true the wheels up. And I have not tried Cindy Drozda's method of using an oil or a wet bath on these while I'm grinding, see if that keeps the wheels clean. And one thing I have noticed with these, this is a 150 grit wheel. They can make them to about any grit you want. And the other wheel over here, my coarse wheel, is an 80 grit. When I compare them to the other two wheels on the steel wheels, their 80 grit is way coarser than this one, and their 180 grit, which is a fine grit wheel for them, is coarser than this one. And I don't really know why. They both leave a very nice surface. It tends to look a bit more polished than it does off the aluminum oxide wheels. But these are so nice because they're always going to run true. Very, very smooth, and it'll do that on about any kind of grinder you can put it on. And of course, this grinder is brand new. It doesn't have hardly any dirt on it, but I have to do extensive testing on this. Another excuse to buy more toys just to see which grinding wheels work best. I will go back and forth between them, but you know, they last a long time. You got to pay a lot of money for them, but they're worth it. Okay, this grinding wheel is a custom wheel. They've been very common in the metalworking industry, very uncommon for us in the wood turning industry. As far as I'm concerned, this is the wheel of the future. Number one reason, it's spin balanced, so you're never going to have to worry about it wobbling because it's not balanced properly. It is from a piece of steel, so it's never going to get eccentric this way, never develop any run out. And the material that is on here, this is called CBN, which is cubic boron nitride or something like that. I'm not sure the particularities about it, but this is electroplated onto this wheel. Safety issues, this wheel's never going to blow up. It's never going to fall apart on you. You don't have to worry about getting hit by pieces flying off of it. And it keeps its shape. I've noticed too that it runs way cooler than your standard matrix wheels, and I just like them a lot better. They are more expensive. This was $180+, but it will last for years, and I absolutely love these. Okay, under the heading of specialized grinding wheels, this is relatively new to the wood turning industry. They've been around in the commercial businesses for a long time, but this is referred to as a diamond matrix wheel. This is an aluminum hub, and this is a matrix, which means a mixture of fine diamond particles, which is bonded to the aluminum hub. The nice thing about these, it's already spin balanced, so you'll never run into issues with them being out of balance. They are true this way, and they are very slow wearing. Main advantage, you're not going to have to change them out. You're not going to have to move jigs because the wheel is wearing down. They last a very long time. I haven't worked with the diamond wheels. I use CBN, which is another material. For cleaning these, best way that I've seen, if you look up Cindy Drozda on YouTube, she does a oil bath with a brush on it, which keeps the wheel clean. They don't seem to develop hardly any run out. Good tool, but I just prefer the CBN. Okay, this is another type of grinding wheel. This one is a matrix, so it is a mix of aluminum and ceramic particles. This one was actually designed and made with wood turners in mind for our high-speed steel tools. This is a matrix, so it's a mix of the abrasives and some sort of a composite to hold it all together. If you look here, these are little bushings, so you can move them for different size arbors depending on how big the shaft is on your motor. They work very nicely, and if I was using a matrix type of wheel like this is probably the type I would have. One of the safety issues with this type of a wheel, this is a matrix wheel, so the abrasive is in a compound of some sort that they press or heat or whatever to cure it to make it a good solid wheel. One of the warnings that came with my Baldor grinder said when you first turn this on, stand out of the way. There are chances that it could have cracked or chipped during shipping. You don't want to be in the line of fire if this should happen to be a cracked or chipped wheel, and if you do get cracks or chips in them, then it's time to throw them away. That is another reason for keeping all your blade guards in place when you're using this, and a lot of people will generally have a safety shield over here. At minimum, you want to wear a face mask when you're grinding with one of these. This is one of the safety concerns with this type of a matrix wheel, that when you change the wheel or put a new wheel on, you do not want to over tighten this nut right here. What happens is the same thing that can happen if you over tighten when you're using your chuck on a tenon or recess. You can actually crack it, or you can bend it or put it under enough stress so that any extra stress is going to make it break. So I get it down finger tight, and then just barely snug it up. Doesn't need much to hold it on, doesn't need much to seat it and keep it in place and stable and steady. You just don't want to over tighten it. This is a 3/4 horsepower, which is fairly standard. I consider that a good amount of muscle to have for these grinders. This grinder, 3/4 horse, is not nearly as strong as this grinder over here, 3/4 horse. Biggest difference that does is if I put a fair amount of pressure on the tool when I'm grinding, as in trying to take off more steel at one time than I normally do, this one will slow down quite a bit. This one doesn't, but this one costs a lot more money. I turn wet wood. One of the problems with wet wood and your iron filings that you get from sharpening, they will leave rust stains on your wood. I like having this piece of wood here because after I sharpen, knock it a few times, and that knocks most of the iron particles off, so hopefully that eliminates some of those little black dots that you find mysteriously on your wood a day or two later. Okay, so checklist for these to make sure the wheels are running true. Take the wheels off, see how good the shafts are running. If they're running pretty true, put the wheels on, see how they run. It can be because the wheels are wobbling side to side. It can be because the wheels are not round this way. That's one problem. Sometimes your mounting washers on there, they can be lopsided, and if you rotate the wheel a quarter or half a turn on it and then tighten it back up again, it will run true. Sometimes it will be one wheel and not the other. You can never really tell, and it's actually best to do the truing with one wheel on, take it off, true up the other wheel, and then put both wheels on and run them together and see how they work. Another problem you can run into with wheels that are not running true, These are bushings. Go inside the wheel and onto the motor shaft. The plastic bushings like this are generally not real high quality. They can have a little bit of run out in them to start with and can cause some of the extra vibrations in it. Another thing that can be a problem is sometimes the motor shafts are not straight, or they're not perfectly straight, and they have a little bit too much run out. So no matter how true your wheel is, it's never going to run true, or if your wheel is balanced, it's still not going to run true because it starts off crooked down there to begin with. If it is that bad, sometimes you have to take them back and get another grinder. When you first turn these machines on, the wheels can be wobbling a bit. You need your grinder to run smooth and clean. It makes it a lot easier to keep your tools on the wheel when it's moving. And there are going to be a number of reasons why your wheels are wobbling, and I'm going to go through those right now. First thing to check, and I do this without turning the motor on, spin the wheel, see if it has any wiggles or wobbles in it. If it's not, then that means it's at least halfway decent. If you want to see if it's got any eccentricities in it or wobbles, take a pencil, barely touch it to it, spin it. And you can see I'm getting a little bit of marking on it, which means that the wheel is not perfectly round. If it's not round, it's going to wobble. Another variation on that too is your side-to-side wobble. Again, you can do the same thing. Put a pencil on it. And if you're getting marks on the side, this one isn't too bad. Little bumps all the way around. Those have to be evened out. That is one of the things that can make your grinder wobble, your wheels wobble and vibrate while you're trying to sharpen, and that makes it difficult. So this is how we fix it. Okay, now I turn this on. It's not moving too bad. Not enough to make this thing move off the bench, but I do like to clamp this one down or screw it down. Now to true up the wheel, this is your common diamond dressing stick. Not high tech, but it works. If you want to take the wobble off, you can't just plunge it into the wheel. You have to ease it in so it's just hitting the high spots, and then gradually ease it in a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more till your wheel is round. Okay, so I'm on the tool rest here. Move it until it just starts touching. Move it back and forth. Main thing this does is this holds it steady, so it's not going to bounce with the wheel. I'll slow it down this way. That won't make it perfectly round, but it gets it a lot better. You can do the same thing on the sides. Again, use very gentle pressure. Move it in until it just barely touches. And the other side. Slow her down. So these wheels, they're not generally real high quality. They'll work. You can get upgrades, which you're going to pay more money for, or just go ahead and use this one until it's worn out and then get a nicer wheel later. That's one of the ways to take the wobble out of the grinding wheels. Okay, a couple items on maintenance of the matrix type wheels or your standard aluminum oxide grinding wheels. Very important to have it perfectly round or as close to it as you can, and you need to keep it clean. If it starts getting metal buildup on it, it won't cut as well. So this is a tool from One Way again. There are several variations of these out on the market. This is one that will true up the face of your grinding wheel and clean it a little bit. Nice thing about this, from the pivot point, it keeps it square. So I turn this on. It just makes gentle sweeps. Takes very little pressure. So this one is a little out of round this way, so this side stands further out, this one's further back in. Another pass. and keep doing that till the wheel's perfectly cleaned up. If your wheels are out of round, your grinder's going to shake and vibrate all over the place, and that just makes it more difficult to hold your tools on it when you're sharpening. Yeah, more toys for the shop. This is another type of sharpening station. There are several variations of these. This is like the smaller home version one. Instead of your grinding wheels, you're using an abrasive strip or sandpaper, basically, or cloth. The advantage with these, this is not going to go out of balance or out of true. They do tend to run a little bit cooler than most of your grinding wheels. This one is made with an adjustable platform. Loosen. It's got a lock on the back, so you can set whichever particular angle you want. And if you go down here, this is actually for setting up a couple different type of gouge jigs that they make. A nice little system. If I was to have one like this in my shop, it would work fine. The main thing I would want to use on this would be for sharpening the one-way tip for their coring blades, because I think those work a little bit better flat. This also does not put any concave to the bevel side of your gouges and tools. Some people say it works better, some people say it doesn't make any difference. I don't really know, I've never used it, but a nifty little outfit, and I do like that you can pre-select and repeat angles via the platform here for sharpening your different tools. Now I prefer the platform sharpening. This is the one-way platform, adjustable here. Generally they go in up very close to the wheel, lock it in place. Some people will actually take and grind this out a little bit so they can come in from the sides. Note of warning, you do not really want to grind on the side of the wheel. It tends to put sideways pressure on it, and they're not designed for that, but you can adjust the angle to whatever tool you're going to be using, lock it in place. Just another variation on the platform. Okay, I'm having Jeremiah here demonstrate this particular sharpening system. This is not one that I use. A lot of people do use them, and there are a number of similar products out there, but this is one that he's familiar with. So Jeremiah, go ahead.
Okay, with this particular design, you have a lot of control in adjusting how much of a sweep that you will achieve. That the sweep is achieved by adjusting this adjustment bar here up and down depending on what your angle is. If we bring this all the way forward, we'll increase the length of the sweep. If we bring it up, we're going to shorten that. So I have this one set up for this bowl gouge, and I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate how easy it is to use and repeat your sharpening angle.
That makes it pretty simple for even beginning turners to get that profile repeatable. This is your depth stop too. Tells you how far to stick your tool out beyond the edge of the jig here, so you can get repeatable angles again.
Another thing to note with this particular jig, same with the Varigrind 2, you have to control the shape of the profile, but with this one it allows you to utilize the full width of the grinding wheel, whereas with the Varigrind 2 you're stuck in wherever that is going to, where the jig is going to hold it onto the wheel. So some people like the fact that they can actually utilize the whole width of their grinding stone.
Yeah.